Ostrogoths, the Germanic people who cornered the Roman Empire. For centuries, there has been debate about the iconic yet enigmatic people who, according to several scholars, brought the Western Roman Empire to its knees and politically cornered the Byzantine Empire. How could a coalition of semi-nomadic tribes do such a thing? Let's find out. Origins. The geographical origin of the Goths is something that has been discussed countless times over the years, and although there seems to be a generalised opinion among historians on this subject, it can never be established as a statement. This is because there is no written evidence of the existence of the Goths before their interaction with the Roman Empire, since it was the Romans who were in charge of writing down the deeds of the Goths. For this reason, although there is a theory that places Gdansk, Poland as the place of origin of the Goths, most scholars agree that this theory cannot be taken as indisputable. This theory is supported by different archaeological evidence that has been found over time in that territory. For example, the 3,000 tombs found in eastern Pomerania, Poland. This discovery gave more notoriety to the work written by Jordanes, Roman official and historian, author of the work Gothic, Origin and Deeds of the Goths. Although this work was taken for many years as implausible because of its use of mythological resources, it has been taken much more seriously since findings such as the one mentioned above, since it agrees with Jordanes' account. Moreover, the fact that Jordanes has expanded his narrative with the use of fantasy does not mean that this should be taken into account. On the contrary, knowing that Jordanes was inspired by and completely based on the work of another key person for the knowledge of the Goths, Cassiodorus. Cassiodorus was a Roman politician and writer who lived among the Goths for some time and served their king Theodoric. He compiled all possible information and detailed it in his work, which unfortunately is lost to this day. Jordanes was commissioned to make a summary of the extensive work of Cassiodorus, and that is how the work mentioned above was born. According to this work, the Goths departed in 3 different ships from Scandinavia to new horizons. Each of these ships explains the origin of the 3 types of Goths: Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, and the Gepids. Society. To this day, the debate rages as to whether the Ostrogoths were a single people or a coalition of peoples. Some scholars argue that the Ostrogoths should not be understood as a single ethnic group, but as a confederation of people united by the same goals, by the same interests, and by sharing similar roots. This theory emphasises that the Ostrogoths, who were known as Eastern Goths, differed greatly from the original Goths in customs and ideology. The theory holds that during the migration, they would have interacted with other tribes, forming new families through marriage and adopting aspects of different peoples, which was then reflected in the social organisation of the people. The organisational structure of the Gothic society was at first quite balanced and linear. They were a semi-nomadic people in which the citizens were free and possessed almost the same rights and obligations regardless of their social stratum, which by the way were not so marked. Different authors have estimated that in a settlement of 100 families, there were only 4 or 5 elite families, but this was modified over the years as the link with the Eastern Roman Empire grew. The peasant families had access to trade their crops with the Byzantines, so they could slowly climb up the social stratum and access a better quality of life. Because of this, a sort of aristocracy slowly manifested itself, bringing about quite significant social change. However, this allowed for an essential order for the growth of any society: roles. Like any society in the ancient world, citizens had to stop any activity if they were recruited for combat, which caused a slowdown in economic activity. Due to the aristocracy that was slowly emerging, the Goths of the East began to see the need to order their society and establish roles that would allow it to grow, even in times of war. Thus, the Ostrogothic society began to lay the necessary foundations for the creation of an empire. The army ceased to be an obligation for all citizens and became an option only for those who wanted to contribute to the expansion of the territory. This allowed the peasants to dedicate themselves solely to cultivating crops and not having to worry about going to the battlefield, in addition to the security provided by having an army to protect the borders. Economy. With the new social order established, the Ostrogoths were able to concentrate on generating an efficient economic structure. Although the Ostrogoths did not exploit agricultural activity in the way the Visigoths did, the economic development they obtained thanks to agriculture was very well exploited in different aspects. Obviously, this worried the neighbouring peoples since they feared that this economic growth could be reflected in wars and conquests. Their point of view was not at all wrong, especially in the case of the Ostrogoths, who had managed to consolidate an army dedicated solely to battle, something that demonstrated their expansionist desires, since at that time it was common to prioritise numerous but ineffective armies, since all the peasants and slaves were forced to serve on the front lines without previous knowledge or experience. Thanks to this, the Ostrogoths carried their expansionist desires to fruition, setting their sights primarily on fertile lands that could be exploited. Interestingly, this very thing led them to encounter the second activity they developed, the extraction of minerals. This activity was probably discovered by the Ostrogoths when they settled in Dacia. This not only served them to establish commercial ties with the Byzantines, but also greatly differentiated the Goths from the rest of the Germanic peoples. Conquest of the Huns. Although the Goths experienced all this growth, they were not exempt from experiencing what happened to every ancient civilization, namely being conquered. The Huns, a civilization we have already discussed in History Dat, began a campaign against the Ostrogoths under the command of the legendary Attila. The Gothic lands were under Hun rule for most of Attila's reign, but after his death, the Ostrogoths seized the moment and rebelled against the sons of the mythical king, who concentrated more on fighting for the throne than on keeping a close eye on the vassal peoples. It should be noted that the Ostrogoths collaborated with the Gepids to declare their independence from the Huns. Reign of Theodoric. During his time in Ostrogoth lands, Attila had Valamir as his general. Valamir was the king of the Ostrogothic people, so he was the first to rise up against the Huns after the death of the legendary Attila. He used the same method that Attila used, i.e. raiding Roman lands and then demanding money to stop the invasions, and offering protection and loyalty. After an acceptable reign, Valamir was succeeded by his brother Theodemir, who made peace with the Roman Empire and sent his son Theodoric to Constantinople as a guarantee of the pact. The young Theodoric was educated at court until 474 AD, when he became king of the Ostrogoths. The young revolutionary succeeded in uniting all the Eastern Goths and commanded a huge army of about 20,000 men to the gates of Constantinople. This sudden move was the result of the strained relations that the Emperor Zeno and the young Theodoric had maintained for several years. Because battle was not a good option for either side, the monarchs came to an agreement. Theodoric obtained Roman noble titles that gave him the opportunity to inherit the prized Italian territories. For his part, Zeno got Theodoric to march against Odoacer, who had risen to power in the Western Roman Empire. After assassinating him, Theodoric proclaimed himself king of Italy and the Ostrogothic people, which began as a confederation of tribes, became a powerful kingdom with a vast territory. Fall. Like all ancient empires, the Ostrogoths found themselves unable to sustain what they knew would happen sooner or later. A series of civil conflicts completely divided the kingdom, which suffered an almost instantaneous social collapse. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian I seized the moment and sent the general Flavius Belisarius to Italy to expel the Ostrogoths and regain the Italian territory that had previously belonged to the Western Roman Empire. Although Justinian negotiated with the Ostrogoths on several occasions, the agreement and peace between the two sides never lasted long. In the midst of the chaos, a heroic figure appeared to restore hope to the Byzantines, Totila. He managed to present a highly effective defence and attack against the Romans, but these hopes were dashed when Totila fell in the Battle of Tagina. The Goths have gone down in history as indirectly responsible for one of the most momentous events in history, the fall of the Roman Empire. In fact, many historians do not consider them only indirectly responsible, but place them as protagonists in the historical event that marked the beginning of the Middle Ages. Don't close the video yet! Before you go, please subscribe and leave us a like if you like the content. It will help us to grow and continue making much more content. Now, without further ado, we say goodbye.